Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and how does it feel, Bradley, to not have to wake up Wednesday morning and watch a new episode of TV?
It feels pretty great, actually, because then I don't have to wake up an extra hour early for work every single day just so I can watch a stupid sci-fi show that I love so much.
I mean, I have to stay up if I want to watch it. That's what's getting me. I'm like, do I want to stay up and be exhausted tomorrow?
Right.
Or do I want to not stay up and potentially have Twitter or TikTok or something spoil the episode for me? Decisions. This week I don't have to worry about, because everybody who's posting comic panels 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday, by the way, I don't know how y'all are getting these comics at 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday, because mine are never on the app until the next morning. They will always blur the comics out. For whatever reason, the people who read comics and post about them on Twitter always blur the image out, so I never have to worry about it being spoiled. The most that goes on is my brain is, oh, Dr. Aphra number 30 came out today. I should go read that.
Yeah, just a reminder.
I don't have to worry about that with comics. TV shows? Oh yeah. I'm delighted to not have to worry about this for a while. Though we're not going without new Star Wars, because Thursday Jedi Survivor comes out.
Okay. Well, I don't have a PC nor a PlayStation, so I can't actually play that game.
And you haven't even played Fallen Order, I don't think.
Still to this day have not played Fallen Order because the people at Nintendo are cowards and they refuse to port it to the Switch, because I have a theory that they're waiting for the next generation console and then they'll port it.
Yeah, it's weird what actually comes over to Switch. EA doesn't do their games over to Switch is the thing. They don't do a lot of their games over to Switch. I think it's because Switch doesn't have like a solid built-in microtransaction ecosystem. And you have to remember, Fallen Order is weird, like super weird for when did this game come out? Like 2018, 2019, something like that.
Right.
Hang on, this is the thing Charles didn't research. Let me Google it really fast. So Jedi Fallen Order came out in 2019, and if you remember 2019, this was still during the era of everything must be a live service, everything must have microtransactions, which is why it was super weird that Jedi Fallen Order was a single player, everything is included in the game. And it didn't like sell cosmetics, you could get the deluxe edition, but it wasn't a live service, like you got what you paid for. And that's why like it blew up partially the way it did, because people are like, oh my god, it's an actual single player game that I can play. I think the reason that you don't have a Switch version is because EA at the time was avoiding the Switch, because the Switch didn't make it easy to charge for microtransactions, and EA just wanted all of your money. So no Switch port for you because they can't make money off of it. Although I was in the store. I just finished Breath of the Wild. I finished it like earlier this week.
Oh, nice.
Or like last week. I think I tweeted about it on our like official Twitter or something, because I mentioned it in an episode. And I was at the store. I was shopping for new Switch games and seeing which one I'm going to buy next. And I did see that they ported Skyrim to the Switch. And I was like, of fucking course they ported Skyrim to the Switch.
Yeah, I bought it because I was like, I've heard about it, and I was like, oh, I feel like I never played it because I thought it was just the first person view, but I didn't realize you could change it to like a zoomed out so you can actually see the character and stuff. I was like, oh, I could actually get behind this, because I don't like the shooting style of games where it's like first person view. Like I can't stand any of those games. Like to me, it is the most non-fulfilling experience ever in a game, because you can't actually see your character do anything. I hate that. And so when they did that, I was like, oh, I can just see my cat person running around the fucking...
Of course you played a Khajiit. Of course you played a Khajiit.
Oh, well, I'm not going to play a fucking human. They look
like
ugly as shit.
Like, I'm also not going to judge because...
It was that or a lizard person, so I was like, whatever.
The Argonians, yeah. I don't know a lot about Elder Scrolls lore, because I'm like, I played kind of through Skyrim-ish. Like, I did a lot of the side quests.
I played it for like 3 minutes and then I gave up because it's too hard of a game. But, that's a different story.
That sounds like exactly the type of thing you would do.
Right.
Oh my god. One of these days I'm going to bribe you or bully you in something into trying out Dragon Age Origins fucking 20-year-old RPG system, combat system.
I honestly
You're not going to make it through the Origin. That would be so funny to me. How far did you end up getting in Knights of the Old Republic?
About 3 minutes.
So
I got up until the point, I think it's the part where you get to like a Jedi temple or something, and I was like, this is stupid. I can't play this game anymore.
You made it significantly more than 3 minutes.
Okay.
You would have had to make it through all of Terrace.
Oh,
before
no. I'm thinking of Knights Academy.
Jedi Academy.
Jedi Academy or something like that.
Okay.
I played that for a little bit longer than I played Knights of the Old Republic. The Knights of the Old Republic, I didn't even make it off the ship in the tutorial.
Wow.
Because it was like so annoying.
Bradley is the reason that Let's Plays exist. Because wow, I'm in shock. Yeah, you would have had to make it off of the ship and through the planet, and then the planet gets bombed, and then you go to the Jedi Temple.
Yeah, I didn't even make it that far. No, I got to Coruscant or something.
Terrace. It looks like Coruscant, but the planet is called Terrace. That's
as far as I got.
Okay. So one of these days we'll figure out a vector for Bradley to play Knights of the Old Republic. But until then, speaking of planets that were bombed, and I set this segue up like 4 minutes ago.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I knew I was going to move us this direction. Speaking of planets that were bombed, I don't think we really had any news this week, so we're also recording this 9 days in advance. If that big thing that happened 3 days before this episode came out, we didn't talk about that because we can't see the future. I guess we'll just head on straight into the episode. Bradley, take us into the... Actually, no, I have 2 points before we go in.
Okay.
I have a small point, not a thing we fucked up, but a thing that we didn't bring up last time because Aaron was on, and I feel like I want to bring up, and then a bigger thing that I put a pen in a note, and now I want to come back to that note. So small thing is, remember how we joked about Cara Dune not being there anymore? You know who else is suspiciously missing from season 3 of The Mandalorian, who we were the only ones to accurately predict would not be showing up again?
Who was that?
The Mythal has just disappeared. The Mythal is gone.
What is it called?
The Mithril?
No.
Mithril. I wrote down Mythal because of Dragon Age. Mythal is a Dragon Age character. Yeah, the Mithril's gone.
Yeah. Our blue assistant is officially not an assistant anymore.
He's
been replaced.
He's gone. He's replaced with a droid, which is very funny.
I do actually like that. I like my headcanon for that is going to be that he was so bad at his job that Grief Karga was like, okay, dude, like I just got to get a droid up in here. Like this guy just isn't good at what he does. And he's just too scared all the time. I just need somebody who like is going to put in the work. And this droid does the work.
I have a sneaking suspicion that early on in the writing of these scripts, the droid was supposed to be the Mithril. Yeah. I don't remember specifically what it is. See, now Mithril doesn't sound right to me.
I know. Well, he doesn't even have a name, which is so sad for that character. I mean, aside from all the, the stuff about the actor, but like the character doesn't have a fucking name.
Yeah, the character doesn't have a name. It's just the Mithril.
I'm going to call him Ted.
Okay. Well, Ted, I have a sneaking suspicion Ted was supposed to be the droid.
I think so.
The droid kind of has similar personality
to
Ted. But when all that stuff came out about the actor, they were just like, we're going to replace it with a droid.
Let's do it.
So I just want to point out we were right about the Mithril not being there. Second bigger thing. So I had set a lot of my notes aside about the armorer and the relationship of the Children of the Watch with everybody else because I wanted to see where the season finale was going. And so I sort of have now a reinterpretation of the scene where Den brings in the bit of Mandalore, the chunk of Mandalore,
little chunk of glass or something. Yeah.
So they talk in the recap. I'm getting these from the recap, but they talk in the recap about how, Den mentions to Bo-Katan in season 2 that there's only one way. Armor talking about Bo-Katan Kryze specifically says that she and her family lost sight of the way. So I do genuinely believe going into this season that Children of the Watch very seriously actually believed that they were the only way. That prior to this season starting, that's how they act. And that's why they have that attitude in the first 2.5 seasons of you cannot break any rules whatsoever. You have to follow things exactly right. And I also think that to an extent they are using, it's weird because they're using tactics that are very cult-like, but they're using them as survival strategy to try to keep their particular, what should just be a small religious group, keeping the entire people alive. So we're going to see as this progresses through the season, but I genuinely believe that when Den shows up and is like, hey, somebody's been to the planet's surface and not died. Maybe it's not cursed. This has never occurred to the armor before. And so when she's like, okay, yeah, you can go down there, I think she's thinking, best case scenario, this place is not actually cursed.
Right.
We can go back there. Worst case scenario, Den died.
Right.
Which, that sucks. But he was an apostate.
He's an apostate anyway, so it doesn't matter, yeah.
I'll be sad, but no great loss. So I think that's what's going on in this scene now that I know the direction the armor is going to go.
Yeah.
Is that it's, I think from my perspective, we'll analyze it through the season, they almost kind of became, they're a splinter religious group that kind of became a cult out of necessity. And this season is also walking back some of the things. We'll get into it when we get into episode 4, how this season is walking back some of the stuff that made it seem super cult-like in the first 2.5 seasons, particularly the inducting of children in, when exactly children get inducted into the Children of the Watch and when they become apprentices. But we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. That's my new read on the armor scene. Okay. Is she genuinely didn't believe, she genuinely thought you couldn't go back to Mandalore. And whether or not she actually believed it was cursed, who knows, but she definitely thought you couldn't go back.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in the second section because Bo-Katan has a similar thought process. So
yes, which is very interesting that Bo-Katan and the armor kind of arrive at the same conclusions.
Right.
Like,
just from different points of view.
But I think because the armor uses, both of them arrive at the same at the same conclusion, which is basically I have to do X thing to keep our people alive, and they have different definitions of what our people are. Armorer looks at what happens and says I have to use religion to keep our people together. Bo-Katan is using politics and mythology and like the political structure to keep people together with the Darksaber and building her fleet, all of that. So it'll be interesting where they go this season, but that's my new read on the armorer scene.
Well, then let's get into The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2, where the Mandalorian and Grogu explore the ruins of a destroyed planet. Charles, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
The one thing I liked about this episode was obviously Pelimoto.
Obviously,
Pelimoto was the best thing in this episode.
The only good thing about Star Wars at the moment is Pelimoto.
The best thing about Star Wars is Pelimoto. Every time she shows up, I'm like, yes. They're going to go hand in hand. One thing I really liked was Pelimoto. I really liked that she showed up. She only has this one scene in the season. Spoiler alert. Really loved it. Loved seeing her. Here's what sort of irked me, though, because this scene kind of throws it. It was going to be one of my notes, but I am actually going to just say it up here. Where is Boba Fett?
Yeah.
Because this scene really highlights for me the fact that the show has basically one line acknowledging the Book of Boba Fett. But other than that, Book of Boba Fett never gets brought up. Like what is the character's name? The Major Domo doesn't show up.
Yeah.
He could have shown up in this scene. Pelimoto references Boba Fett, but we have no indication that Boba Fett is around other than the one mention of his name. Spoilers for the finale, he doesn't show up in the finale. It's just like, other than saying, yeah, Boba Fett's here and ruling Tatooine now, no indication whatsoever of where Boba Fett is. And we don't even really see any like visual changes to Tatooine because Boba Fett is around now. Because they're in Mos Eisley, I think, is where Pelimoto is based. So yeah, no Boba Fett. I would have liked to have seen some more, at least in this early section, Book of Boba Fett references. There's another thing that could have been referenced and wasn't, but we'll get to her a little bit later in the episode and my complicated feelings on that. Bradley, what about you? One thing you liked and one thing you didn't.
I definitely like how this episode featured Pelimoto, albeit a brief scene. But there's just something about Amy Sedaris in Star Wars, how she has no idea what anything in Star Wars is, or like she knows nothing about Star Wars. They just give her like a basic script, and I feel like she improvs like the whole entire thing. Like I really don't think she knows anything other than like they give her keywords to say. Like they're like, say Jawa, say this, like, and so she'll be able to say all the stuff to make the story make sense. But then other than that, she's just riffing, and I feel like she's so
badly want to know how much she's riffing.
I really want to know.
How much of this is the script? How much of this is Neil Flynn says something funny? Have you ever watched Scrubs?
I've never seen that, no.
You've never seen Scrubs? Do you know the basic premise of Scrubs?
I do.
Okay, you know the janitor character?
Yes.
Okay, so Neil Flynn, who plays the janitor on Scrubs, so fucking funny that a lot of the times the script literally would not write lines of dialogue for him to say. They would just say, and then Neil Flynn says something something funny.
Got it. I feel like that's exactly what's happening.
And so he would come up just with things like, I don't believe in the moon. I think it's the back of the sun. And he would just say these things on set,
Yeah.
on camera. And the reaction from the other actors is genuine because he just made that up.
Absolutely.
I feel like Pelimoto is the same way.
Absolutely.
It would not
For
surprise
sure.
me.
But one thing I did not like, and I kind of brought this up in our last episode, is that this just feels like a continuation of the first episode. This entire storyline, honestly, it just feels like it needed to be either a slightly longer premiere episode or a 2-part premiere, because there's something about the storyline going back to Bo-Katan and like then actually going to the mines. Like it just all felt like it needed to be one big premiere. And that's the one thing I feel like it suffers in this case, is that little bit of, we could have just used a little bit more. Yep.
I fully agree with that. And I also, I can see though why they wouldn't have wanted to make it only 7 weeks, because they want the attention.
Of course. We begin with Pelimoto on Tatooine being her amazing self. Din visits her in search of a new memory chip for IG-11 she doesn't have the part he's looking for, and instead sells him R5-D4. Din, Grogu, and R5 fly off to Mandalore during the celebration of Bunta Eve.
I find it interesting you bring up Bunta Eve, because that was my first note.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Were you hoping that we were going to see like some kind of pod racing instead of like some what appears to be street speeder racing?
Well, it seems like a racing centric holiday. Yeah, I just Googled really fast to see what Bunta Eve actually is.
Yeah.
It's just a festival in canon, but it looks like a big one. Obviously, we've got the racing in the streets, we've got the pod racing from Phantom Menace. But at least canonically, we don't actually know what this holiday is supposed to be celebrating. There is a Legends explanation, but I'm not going to get into that. Canon, we don't know. But yes, this is Bunta Eve. This is the same race that Anakin wins 50 years, 40 years previously.
And you know, maybe they're just saving it for like the Book of Boba Fett season 2 or something, where they start off the season with him at a pod race event of some kind and he's overseeing it like Jabba did and, you know, the Phantom Menace. It'll be a similar situation. And maybe that's what they're saving. I don't know.
Possibly. I hope we get a Book of Boba Fett season 2, because I'd like to dive more into the culture of Tatooine, because it's set up really interestingly in season 1. But yeah, that would be a good place to do things like this. So I'm not going to go through every single performer in this episode. There are 10 different stunt performers in this episode, if you include the 2 guys who are in the Mando suit. There are 10. We're not going to go through all of them, but I did want to shout out the Rodian, being played by a woman named Dawn Denninger. Dawn Denninger is going to show up a couple of times this season. She's mainly a special effects fabricator, which is part of the reason I bring this up, because I have no idea what a special effects fabricator is. Based on my conversations with a friend of mine who wants to work in prop, as well as just Googling, it seems like, and also based on the fact that she works in costuming, so she's the specialty costume manufacturer for the first season of The Mandalorian, it seems like she works in the department that actually makes the props. Like, that's her thing. So she's actually inside the Rodian suit for this episode. And I think she might also be providing the voice. At least IMDb doesn't differentiate. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm not going to go through everybody else that's in suits in this episode. Worth IMDbing and looking them up, but I wanted to shout her out specifically. My next note is, this is the funniest shit in the season.
For sure. The fact that I love that we've reverted to this idea of Kelly's like, all right, I'm going to start scamming people because she just, there's something about working with Jawas that like we know that they're clearly like, oh, like I'm gonna strip this ship over here and then like sell you back your own parts. Like I love that she's like working with them. She's so smart. And she's just like, yeah, oh yeah, these people at Tatooine have no idea what's hitting them.
If Din Djarin doesn't know he's in a Star Wars and is playing everything completely straight, Pelimoto's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. She is 100% aware she is in a Star Wars, and she has just decided to roll with it and have as much fun as possible. Oh my god. Her thing of, well, I gotta go to the mid-rim, and I gotta put a rush order on the part, so I'm gonna need to have a friend. I'm like, that's incredible. I love this. I love everything about this.
And it leads into my theory that they gave her the script with just the key words like mid-rim and spare parts, and then that was it. Like everything else is like fabricated.
She's just making it up.
Yeah, making up as she goes.
Well, it's interesting because after she, kicks the Rodian out and they're going to put the parts back in, and Din lands and Grogu like leaps over She's like, where'd you learn to leap like a lerman? Is one thing she said. We have seen lerman before. They are the monkey things from, I think, season 1 of Clone Wars, from the episodes Defenders of Peace, I think. It's the one that has, you won't remember this, Bradley, because it's been a while since you've seen Clone Wars, but there's an episode where they like crash land on a planet and they find this village of like monkey people, like lemur people, which is lerman, where that name comes from. And the separatists are also testing a weapon that can destroy organic matter but leave droids unharmed, called the defoliator. Is how it's said. And I believe the villain in that episode is being voiced by George Takei. It's honestly a better episode than it has any right to be.
Oh my god, now I want George Takei to show up in like Book of Boba Fett season 2 as like just like a random ass Tatooine person.
Why hasn't George Takei been in a Star Wars?
I don't know, because he would fit in perfectly with the like, Kalimoto character, the Major Domo character. Like they all kind of like work together in a fun like way, and I kind of want that.
Oh my god, I also desperately want that. I didn't notice initially in the scene or when the first 2 times I watched this episode, but the third time, which is when I watched it to take note, I did notice the Jawas have little like Mardi Gras beads around their necks.
I did not notice that at all.
Yeah, that's go hilarious. Back and look at it again. They have like celebratory streamers that are around like their necks.
That's hilarious.
That's hilarious. Pelimoto mentions that R5 used to work for the rebellion.
Ooh, maybe this will come up later in the show.
Maybe this will come up. R5 is one of the favorite characters for writers to just write weird shit about. In Legends, R5 is force sensitive.
What the fuck?
Yep. In the Infinity story. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize. Forgot this was Infinity's. So R5 is force sensitive in, I guess, a non-canonical Legends story, but everybody just kind of assumes that it was. Legends canon is very complicated and weird and nebulous. But the most famous story about, this is my correcting myself on the air. It looks like the most famous story about R5, which is Skippy the Jedi droid, was in fact not even canonical to Legends. But yeah, in Legends, or at least there was Legends material that suggested he was force sensitive. In canon, we don't know a lot about him, although he does have a short story in From a Certain Point of View that does confirm that he blows his motivator on purpose.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was canon now, but so that's definitely a canon story.
That is definitely canon, that he blows his motivator on purpose.
I like that.
It is in the short story from a Certain Point of View called The Red One.
Oh, I love that.
Highly recommend reading From a Certain Point of View. It's very good. We will see R5's rebellion connections again later in the season. My final note for this section is fucking beautiful as they just pull away
the fireworks,
with the firework. Just a really, really beautiful looking scene.
I love that. I do love it. It was perfect for the trailer too, because like it gave you a sense of like, oh wow, this is gonna be a fun, gorgeous season. And then like they have this little clip. I almost wish they had more with it, but it was really pretty. Like I just love seeing Grogu's like amazement or awe, like whenever he sees the fireworks. And on the side note though, is it not dangerous to fly through fireworks?
It is incredibly dangerous to fly through fireworks, but Dennis doing it anyway for the aesthetic, Bradley.
Of course.
For the visual aesthetic.
Yes, I also forgot to say title card, Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore. So just I forgot to say that in our first little bit. So what do you think? What do you think the Mines of Mandalore is going to be about, Charles? You think they're going to go somewhere this episode?
I think they might go to a location, possibly the mines of Moria, perhaps.
That would make a lot of sense.
Den fights a Balrog.
I'm also waiting for them to just say in the episode, The Mines of Mandalore, so we can roll the credits. You know, I feel like that'll be an easy, just quick moment in this show.
You can't see it because we don't release these videos to the public, but the minute Bradley said roll the credits, I just started giving him a death glare.
Let's actually get into this. The group arrives on the crystallized surface of Mandalore, where R5 is sent out to scout ahead to ensure that the atmosphere is not toxic. When R5 stops responding, Din goes after him in some caves when he is suddenly attacked by several troll-like species living in the caves. After scaring them off, Din heads back to the ship ship and runs the data R5 collected to determine that the air is non-toxic.
So I like how Din's sort of already teaching Grogu a big underlying thing of how this relationship between Din and Grogu has changed in between seasons. Is previously Din was just kind of teaching Grogu things as necessary. Like, I need you to fix this, so I'm going to tell you how to do it. Now he's actively mentoring Grogu. He's actively trying to teach him things, which I think is very cool. So that, I love that scene. I love that nice little moment. My next note is, the fusion bombs did a number on this place when they break through the clouds, and it's just fucked up.
Yeah, that planet, although aesthetically, it looks really fucking cool with all the crystals and everything. Like, it's just...
I fucking love how it looks. It looks so much... Hot take, it looks so much more visually interesting now than it did in Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, because I think what I remember from Rebels, at least, like, I only remember
white.
Like, the dome. Yeah, it's like all white, and there's
everything's
like
in the domes.
Yeah,
and it's just like white, and they do some kind of interesting stuff with the canyons. But sort of the point of Mandalore, at least in Clone Wars and Rebels, was that Mandalore has undergone so much war that nothing ever grew back there. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in the season finale. But the idea is that because the planet's in constant warfare, it basically had all life wiped off of it by the Jedi outside of the domed cities, and now nothing has ever grown back. And it's just kind of like void up until that point. But yeah, I think it looks really interesting now visually. It's a shame it had to get bombed to hell for that to happen. Countless trillions of people died.
I mean, just for aesthetics, the Empire really goes there.
The Empire really values aesthetics above all human lives. The fact that R5 is a fucking coward is so funny to me.
It plays on the whole, like, C-3PO was the kind of scared droid character, and then now it's like, okay, well, we have to have that back, so... It's
like if you took C-3PO's personality, like scaredy cat personality, and you put it into R2's body, that's what you get. I love this. I love this whole character. I, too, would be terrified to go out on this blasted hellscape planet.
Exactly. And I also love that the personality, it works with the dynamic of Grogu and Din as, like, a family unit. Like, they have to have their scaredy cat droid dog, basically. Like, that's what we were missing from this little group.
We're missing a droid.
Yeah,
we're missing a droid companion.
Always missing a droid companion. And
we're always missing a droid companion.
I love that they finally have given Din a droid companion.
As R5, and the thing I like about R5 too, and I brought this point up a bit talking to somebody about episode 8. The thing I like about R5 is that if you know who R5 is, like if you saw this droid in A New Hope, you're like, oh, that's the droid from A New Hope. If you have no idea, if you're only watching The Mandalorian, you don't need to know who he is. Like Bo-Katan, whenever Bo-Katan comes in, they had to sort of bend over backwards to kind of give us a truncated version of her history so we can explain who this person is and why this person is important. We don't have to do that with R5. R5 can just be a droid. You don't even have to know it's the same R5 unit from A New Hope. And I do really dig that.
And that's what's funny, because my friend who is watching all these for the first time has no idea who R5 is, because they don't watch, they've seen the movies, they don't remember, you know what I mean? Like, they're a very casual viewer, and they did not know that this is the same droid from A New Hope. Like, they just thought this was just a random astromech droid that he just randomly gets in this episode. And I thought that was so funny, because you're right, the casual viewer doesn't know who R5 is, but now does, and is like, oh my god, I love that personality of that droid. Like, it's such a cute thing to add.
Yeah, if you're like my age, if you're in your 30s and you haven't really sat down and watched A New Hope since college because everything is going to hell and capitalism is bad and you have to spend all of your time working, then yeah, you're probably not gonna remember who this droid is. But if you do, it's rewarding for the viewers. So put a pin too in the concept of most people who are watching this show, or at least this show is written with the understanding that most people watching it are not going to really remember other Star Wars media, because that's going to come up again at the end of the episode. My next note is R.I.P. Mandalore when he sees the Civic Center.
Yeah, because well, that's what I like about what they've done in this show, is that we've seen these places in the Clone Wars, and now you're kind of seeing what it looks like now, and you're just like, oh, damn, that's the same place in that episode.
Yep. If it's your first time, I do believe that if this is your first time, if you're watching everything in chronological order, this may be the first time we see the inside of Sundari since the Lawless. No, since Siege of Mandalore. Sorry, since the Siege of Mandalore. You haven't seen this place since they took it back from Maul. Like, I
Right.
don't think we ever went inside Sundari during Rebels.
Yeah, I think I saw like a side by side visual. Somebody put like, look, it's like super active and it's like a full on, basically like a city just going, having a good ass time essentially. And then you just see these ruins of like it looks like a zombie like apocalypse happened here.
Yeah, and Bo-Katan will note later in the episode, or Den will note, somebody will note later in the episode that like people were there like 20 years ago, like less than that.
And it looks like
Like
100 years
15
ago.
years
Yeah.
ago, and it looks like the place has been deserted for
Right.
centuries,
Right.
which is how badly the Empire bombed it. Multiple times, actually, as we find out. The Night of a Thousand Tears and the Purge are two different times, and the Purge, they bombed Mandalore they did multiple rounds of bombing just to make 100% sure. So when Den is fighting the sort of troll things, they're called Alamite. When he's fighting the Alamites, I think it's important to note that he is still very bad with the Darksaber.
It looks a little heavy to him.
Yep.
He's struggling a little bit with that sword.
So maybe the implication here is that he doesn't have the ability to connect with the Darksaber. The Darksaber may not be best suited in his hands.
Maybe
We may
so.
come back to this
Maybe
later.
come
in the
back to this
episode.
later in the episode.
He rescues R5, and then he has a couple of interesting lines when he discovers that the planet is habitable. The first is that the charts were wrong, which leads me to believe that, again, we talked at the top of the episode about how the armor and Bo-Katan kind of inadvertently arrived at the same place. I think Bo-Katan was operating off of charts and readings that said that the planet was uninhabitable, because she always refers to the planet as poison, whereas the armorer probably got the same charts and readings or got it filtered down to her through someone, and because she was leaning super hard into the Children of the Watt, the planet must be cursed.
Right. Yeah, like if you go there, you're gonna die because all the bad stuff that happened.
All
there,
the bad,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
all the bad vibes in the air will kill you. Din discovering that this place is not cursed, that everything he has taught about this specific thing is wrong. This is the first direct time that Din Djarin has provably been wrong about something. Because even when Bo-Katan took her helmet off and he realized there were other Mandalorians who were Mandalorian who weren't doing things the way that the Children of the Watch do, that wasn't a direct challenge to his belief. That wasn't directly saying this rigidity, this like, you have to stay on this path, no exceptions, everything the way says is correct, this is the way, has never directly been challenged to be wrong or proven to be wrong before. And here's the first instance where, no, they're wrong. The planet is not cursed.
Right.
You can go back.
Right. And from both sides, it's not only that it's not cursed, it's literally not even poisoned. Like there's scientifically, like it's not
right.
unsafe to be here.
They were all lied to by Moff Gideon. All of them.
Right.
They
It's just imperial propaganda.
Ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were lied to in different ways, but they were all lied to. And I think this is such an important moment too, when it comes to Din beginning to accept Bo-Katan and her faction of Mandalorians as Mandalorian. Because remember, all the way back when he met them, his initial reaction was there's only one way, the way of the Mandalorian. If you don't follow it, you're not Mandalorian. And I don't think he really even refers to Bo-Katan and her people as Mandalorian in the second season. I do think this is the start of when he's like, even when he shows up in episode 1 and he's like, hey, I want to join you to retake Mandalore. He's not really interested in her retaking it. He's interested in it being retaken. Now he's like, oh, we were wrong about something. What else might we potentially be wrong about? But I also think it's important that we've established, and this is why Book of Boba Fett is important. Guys who skipped Book of Boba Fett or said Book of Boba Fett didn't have an impact. The scene in Book of Boba Fett, the season finale, where Boba asks Din, do you really believe in all of that stuff? And Din's like, yes. And Boba's like, good. It's very important to Din's character because even when specific beliefs are challenged, he never loses his faith in the creed, which I do think is an important aspect of his character that's really coming into play here. Do you have anything to say on that, Bradley, or you just want to move on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. You pretty much said it all. I don't really have much else to say. Grogu and Din head off into the mines of Mandalore. Mandalore. Deep below the surface, Din is captured by a cyborg-like creature. Grogu tries to free him, but is unsuccessful. Din sends Grogu to get Bo-Katan for help. Grogu heads back to the ship and has R5 fly him to the moon of Concordia, where Bo-Katan lives.
So I only have 2 notes for this sequence up until they land at the castle. I assume you're going up until he lands at the castle. You're not.
Correct.
All right. I actually have 4 notes for this section. The first is, what in the Horizon Zero Dawn? I fucking hate that thing. Because it reminds me of the weird mechanized dinosaurs from Horizon.
I have no idea what that franchise is, so yeah.
That was my first thought, was it reminds me of the weird mechanized dinosaurs from Horizon Zero Dawn.
It gave me more like mall spider body vibes. That's what I was getting from it. Although somebody pointed out to me that the conspiracy theory, they thought this was supposed to be General Grievous. And I was like, oh my God. No, I don't love that. He's dead, guys. I don't love that.
He's super dead.
Because if he's going to come back, I want him to come back. Like, I don't want him to be some weird fucking spider thing. I want him to be fucking General Grievous. I don't want him to be a weird spider thing.
Oh my God. Yeah, I fucking hate this spider thing. It scares the shit out of me.
Oh no, it's terrifying.
I can't do it.
Disgusting. And I also love that it has 2 kind of bodies. Like, it has a mecha suit, and then it also has 3. I'm sorry.
There's a third one.
There's a third one that we find out later. But yeah, it like has like I'm not going to say humanoid because it's definitely not humanoid, but it has its like regular kind of everyday walk around with a staff kind of body. Then it has its giant mecha body that it uses to explore. I don't even know what it's doing here, honestly. Like, can we talk about that for a second? What the fuck is it doing here?
It's just vibing.
Where did it come from? What is it doing here? Why does it exist?
This would be a great thing for like a Mandalorian comic to explain.
Yeah.
Or like a novel set on Mandalore to explain. But we don't have these things for some reason. So no, we have no explanation on this. Fuck you, that's why.
I love it, and it's terrifying.
My next note is this is when Grogu is doing Mr. Grogu's Wild Ride. I was like, this is amazing. I love everything about Mr. Grogu's Wild Ride.
I almost want them to do a whole entire episode from Grogu's perspective where like he does his own solo adventure by himself. It would be in the vein of this. It would be so fucking funny.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, like Through Imperial Eyes, but for Grogu. That was the episode of Rebels where the Callus was the protagonist of it. And they actually have an opening scene. The opening scene of it is first person. That whole episode was supposed to be first person, but they couldn't make it work. But yeah, there's a whole episode from Callus's point of view. I would love to see an entire episode from Grogu's point of view. Like, all the interesting stuff is happening just off camera, and Grogu's staring at a bunch of berries for like 5 minutes. Because he wants the berries.
I think it'd be so cute to have him have his own little adventures. Maybe even on like maybe there's you could make it a whole entire thing where, you know, Mando drops him off at Pelimoto's and then like he goes on an adventure on Tatooine by himself. Like, she loses him and she has to try to get him back, and like she can't find him. Like, it would be so funny. And then like at the end she just pretends like they were hanging out the whole time and nothing happened.
Wasn't there an episode of Pokemon that did that?
There was a short it's like a mini movie that happened at the beginning of every Pokemon movie, and there was one where they do it from the Pokemon's perspective.
They leave them at like a spring or something, like a camp or something. By themselves.
Yep.
It's like Pikachu's Big Adventure by himself or whatever.
Yeah, and it's all the Pokemon together, and they do like a little thing where they lose. I think they lose Togepi or something, and then they have to go get her, and it's like a whole thing.
You know, for a guy who literally, I'm sitting here with my Gengar coaster that my coffee is currently resting on, and like we have a giant Gengar sign on our apartment door. For a guy with as much Pokemon merch in his house as I have, I know very little about Pokemon. After the original 151 Pokemon, I just don't care. I just don't acknowledge any of the ones after Gen 1.
All 899 of them.
I'm not learning that, Bradley. I refuse. And I see people online all the time. And it's not just like kids that are grabbing like their first Pokemon game. It's people that are like my age who were like 9 or 10, or actually younger. I was like 7 or 8 when Pokemon started coming out. People who are my age are like, oh, I really love Cryosaur or whatever from Gen 5. And I'm like, The fuck is that? How do you remember all of these Pokemon, but you can't remember to text a guy back?
I mean, I know almost all 1010 Pokemon, but I can't learn another language. So I don't know what's wrong with America.
You're one
but
of those
that's it.
people. Okay,
That's what's
Bradley.
wrong with America.
How do you
right
remember
there.
1,000+ Pokemon, but you can't get a boyfriend?
Yeah, see, it doesn't make sense. America, there's something wrong with America. Has a problem, and that's what it
Maybe
is.
there's something wrong with you.
No, I think it's just America, not me.
All right. Well, I'm going to be stubborn in my refusal to ever. That was like part of the big reason I picked up Pokemon Go too, because I was like, oh, yay, it's the original 151. It's going to be a bunch of Pokemon I actually know. And it's also the last time any of us felt happiness was that summer. So everything went downhill after that. Speaking of things going downhill, Mr. Grogu's Wild Ride hops over to back to Kalevala, where we see that Bo-Katan does in fact just spend all day sulking on her throne, which I found immensely funny. Now, I tried to look up who's voicing the droid. This is my final note. I tried to look up who's voicing the droid in this episode. Not listed anywhere. It's not listed on the IMDb. The Gonk droid is being played by someone. The Gonk droid is being played by Joe Osmond, apparently. Joe Osmond, who plays the Gonk droid, has apparently appeared in some Star Wars before as a Jawa and the Gonk droid. Appeared in the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
There you go.
And also has a Disney trifecta.
Oh.
Because she was in Captain Marvel and Dumbo and The Mandalorian.
There you go.
I'm glad I clicked on that.
Yeah.
Just to confirm that was not, in fact, the voice of the droid at Castle Kreese. So good work, Joe Osmond. Sorry I almost missed you, but congratulations on your Disney trifecta. Anyway, moving on. Couldn't find who's voicing the droid. So if anybody knows who voiced this droid that serves Bo-Katan, let me know, because I couldn't find it anywhere.
At Castle Kreese, Bo-Katan sees Mando's ship arriving and goes to tell him off when she only sees Grogu and knows something is wrong. She gets in her ship and heads off to the mines of Mandalore. The pair travel deep down into the mines to confront the cyborg. Bo-Katan uses the Darksaber to defeat him and kill it, saving Din.
Yeah, so they fly in and we get to see in all of its glory the ruins of Sundari, which we did see in the trailer, but RIP to Sundari. That sucks. Bo-Katan, as they're walking along through the mines, Bo-Katan mentions that there was a time that the Mandalorians and the Jedi got along quite well.
A little nod to Clone Wars, and it does reward you if you've seen these things.
Yes, you'll immediately know, okay, she's probably talking about Ahsoka. She's also probably talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi.
You know, I also just realized something too. Does she know that Grogu knows Ahsoka?
Yes, she was the one who told them to...
Oh, that's right.
She's
that's right.
clearly in contact with Ahsoka.
Right.
Yeah, she's clearly in contact with Ahsoka. So
now I'm wondering if she'll show up in Ahsoka, like just as like a little.
I would like to see her sort of mentioned in Ahsoka.
If not, to just update us
because they were friends.
Yeah.
I like how we're already seeding the idea with the Alamites and stuff that things have survived the purge of Mandalore. Didn't realize at the time that this was seeding that idea, but it does make something we discover later on a lot more less coming the fuck out of nowhere. Certain things that were beneath the ground survive bombings.
Right. So do we know, do these Alamites, were they there before or were they there only
I think
after?
She says they were there before and they started coming up after. Like they were deeper
They
down.
were kind of awoken, or maybe they were just in caves only.
They were disrupted by the bombing.
Okay.
That a lot of things were disrupted by the bombings. We're going to find out later in the episode.
Yeah.
So they head down there. Bo fights the thing. Bo picks up the Darksaber to fight the thing. My boyfriend, who I watched this season with, he immediately, this was the moment he said he immediately clocked that she was going to get the Darksaber back on a bullshit technicality. He's like, the minute she picked that up, he was like, she's going to get that back. And it's going to be like some bullshit technicality that she gets it back on because of this moment right here where she picks up the Darksaber. But also notice she's really good with the Darksaber.
Right. Interesting how it looks like she wields it with such technique and almost like if she's used it before.
Almost like she has wielded it before and trained with it and connects with the blade, whereas Din has no idea what he's doing and is not suited to that sort of leadership role or to wield that metaphorical power.
Right.
Funny how that works. I really do hate the gross fucking crab thing. Everything about it sucks and I hate it in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
Like, congratulations, you did your job, but I really fucking hate it, and I'm glad it's dead.
I also just want to note, I love the return of the shield. That's one of my favorite things about Bo-Katan. I just love the shield.
Yes, The shield will be important later.
After the fight, Din wakes up to find Bo-Katan and Grogu by the fire. Din tells her he cannot leave without redeeming himself. She reluctantly leads him to the living waters while also revealing personal truths along the way. Din immerses himself to restore his status as Mandalorian, but a sudden drop-off causes him to sink deep into the water. Bo-Katan dives in to save him, and on the way back up, she comes face to face with a mythosaur.
Yes. I find it interesting that Bo-Katan gave Din the Darksaber back.
Yeah, she just kind of hands it to him like casually. Like it's not even like a
what's in his
like
stuff. She puts it with his stuff, and there's a shot of him putting it back on his belt that it's with his stuff. Like she doesn't. Right. She has the opportunity to take it and hold on to it here, and she doesn't.
Yeah, it is kind of a little weird. Also, it's really not that weird because we have established in the last episode at least that she has given up on the whole leading Mandalore thing, so she doesn't really care.
That's my next note, and that segues really well into it. Actually, is that Bo-Katan at this point has no faith in anything at all. She has completely lost her faith in herself. She's lost her faith in Mandalore. She's lost her faith in the Mandalorians and in the Darksaber. She just picks it up and uses it like any other, like borrowing any of other Din's weapons, and then gives it back to him because why does she care? Everything she says in this about Din basically says, "You were right, the planet's not cursed," and she's like, "Is it though?" Because everything around here sucks. Like, nothing about this is good. Like, she really does genuinely have no reason to continue on with doing what she's doing. And I do find it interesting that she relinquishes the Darksaber here. And she almost kind of goes along with Din, sort of okay, you're stupid. You went the wrong way. You got yourself captured. I will help you just because I'm here. The direction they went with her character this season is very interesting. Shockingly good,
too. Yeah, I like the dichotomy of someone who is being dependent on faith and like trying to restore their actual status in a faith-based system, and someone who genuinely is like, nothing matters. Like, I literally have lost all hope on just about anything. And the dynamics between the two, both trying to like accomplish something, is just really interesting.
What's really interesting is that Den has a line a little bit later in the scene where he's sort of explaining, like, to him, the creed is the reason that they survive. And this is... Season 3 does this thing where I guess the writers realized that they accidentally wrote all of the cult stuff in the first 2.5 seasons and didn't write any of the stuff that is the reason that this faith exists. Like, they focused so much on the cult-like aspects of it that they were like, oh shit, we haven't established very much about this actual religion. We gotta do that.
Which would make it seem like a cult. Yeah.
So he brings up the fact that the creed and hanging on to the creed is part of the only reason that the Mandalorians survive, or at least their covert survive. And I think we do see later in the season, or it's even mentioned in episode 1, as soon as the Mandalorians that were following Bo-Katan lost their faith, i.e. she did not come back with the Darksaber, and she did not come back with the story of defeating Moff Gideon and taking the Darksaber back, they melted away. And while they continue to call themselves Mandalorians, they're no longer acting like. And Din's argument is, well, holding to some sort of tradition, holding to some sort of sense of identity is what kept the Mandalorian culture alive. And I'm like, yeah, I want to say it's run like a cult because it's run like a cult, but Din's also right in that somebody holding on to this will allow it to spread back out. And we're going to see throughout the season the way at which the Mandalorian culturally come together is really, really interesting in terms of how they end up taking some of the best aspects of both groups and combining them together. I think that is really, really neat where this is going. And it really kind of starts here with this conversation between Din and Bo-Katan, where he's kind of explaining that, you know, the creed is important. The creed is what has kept our people alive throughout this period of diaspora. So I just think this season has no business being as interesting as it is because of all the stuff that's going to happen in this season. It should be so shallow and dumb, but there's some really neat stuff happening with the writing here. You can make pog soup. StarWars.com put out a recipe for pog soup.
Okay, do we know what it is? Oh, we didn't look it up. Okay.
Let me Google it. This is the thing Charles didn't research.
Yeah,
so if you're only joining us for Mandalorian, Yeah, soup recipe. If you're only joining us for The Mandalorian, there's usually one thing that Charles will fuck the course of the episode. I caught mine this time, which was R5 in Legends wasn't even Force sensitive. That was an Infinity story. And this is the thing Charles didn't research, aka the thing he forgot to Google before we started the episode. It is a vegetable soup. Hog soup is a vegetable soup. It is bell peppers, onions, carrots, garlic, and then a bunch of different curry powder, minced ginger, all of it. You can Google the recipe, but it's kind of bell pepper based. I really should try it. After we record this, I'm gonna go to the gym and then I'm gonna go to the store and I might see if my boyfriend wants to try Pog soup.
Yeah, let us know next week if you make it.
It probably won't be next week because we're all super busy, but maybe before the end of The Mandalorian, I'll try Pog soup.
Okay.
And we'll see how it actually is. So they're walking through the mines, they're having a conversation, and Bo-Katan tells a story about her father.
Interesting.
Which Duke Adonai Kryze, who is the gentleman being referenced, basically has only been named in one place. It's Star Wars Build the Millennium Falcon 32, Guide to the Galaxy, The History of Mandalore. It's like in a random magazine somewhere is where he got named. We don't know anything about him other than what is said in this episode. He seems to have ruled from Mandalore. We do know that eventually there was a war that was fought to put someone on the throne. It's hard to say whether or not he died. Presumably he died in this war or his death kicked this war off. But it seems like he ruled from Sundari. So it seemed like the Kryzes were actually the royal family pre-Mandalorian Civil War, which is interesting. You know, this is the first information we're really getting about Adonai Kryze other than the fact that he existed. No mention of Satine Kryze. She doesn't bring up Satine at all. She's mostly bringing up her father because that's the memory she associates with the Mines of Mandalore, is going down there with her father. The Satine thing, okay, so I'll address this now. I've been telling people like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this because I want to talk about it on the show. Two things can exist simultaneously. I do want some reference to Satine Kryze having ruled Mandalore before Bo-Katan did, because she was it was Satine Kryze, and then, what's his name? Almec. Prime Minister Almec ruled after, with Pre Vizsla briefly in the middle there. Anyway, I wanted some reference to Satine. However, I do acknowledge that if you're the kind of person who's never watched a Star Wars before, trying to bring up the complicated history of the leaders of Mandalore is going to be really confusing for you, especially when there's really no reason to bring it up other than for its own sake. That's the issue that I have, is that usually when something is brought up, like, you know, a cameo is had or something is mentioned in the context of this story, it has to inform the story in some way. And Satine was such a controversial leader that I feel like her being mentioned or focus being put on her would detract from this season's overall theme of Bo-Katan figuring out how to unite the clans and to be a good unifying leader for Mandalore. Because she kind of brings up, the focus is more on Bo-Katan and the story that she's had. And I do feel like if they had tried to bring Satine up and explain Satine, it would have confused Mandalorian history for the viewers. Now, I'd like to see some supplemental material that delves more into where Bo-Katan is now at with her sister, but I do think that looking at the season as a whole, it would have unnecessarily complicated the backstory of Mandalore to get into all the previous rulers.
I think so. And also, you don't want to get into the whole messy situation of, you know, she was a teen mother and she had a child that was illegitimate and the throne or something that secretly is now her cousin.
There's potentially like a bastard heir to the throne.
Yeah, bastard heir to the throne that may or may not show up later in the season, but whatever, you know.
Yes. It's complicated because, you know, I love Satine Kryze, but I do acknowledge from a writing standpoint, I can see why they wouldn't have included her at all in the season. And really, we don't get a lot of Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is not somebody who spills her backstory easily. So she also really only mentions Adonai this one time. This is the only time she's going to mention Adonai. Also worth noting that, like, there's a whole thing about them losing Mandalore. When they lost Mandalore after Satine died, they never really lost Mandalore. They took it back from Maul's puppet government. And that's the point where we pick up with Bo-Katan. So I would have liked to have at least one mention of Satine, but really diving into like her as a component of Bo's backstory probably would have confused the season, and it probably would have confused people who'd been like, who is that? The father makes an easy, uncomplicated figure for us to have one little endearing story about.
Right. Yeah, because I think her sister relationship is too complicated, so it's hard to do that storyline and go through all the episodes of Clone Wars and all the stuff. Whereas the unbeknown to us before this father, that's barely mentioned, that's easy to just be like, oh yeah, I had a dad one time that was once a ruler, I guess, at some point, and was like, oh yeah, he was proud of me. Like that's it. Like,
and also the whole point of the scene is for her to eventually say her dad dies defending Mandalore, and Den says this is the way, and Bo kind of has a moment. Hot take, you can't really do that with Satine. And the reason you can't really do that with Satine is because Satine's downfall and death is so complicated that it's not clear cut. It's not easy. Debates rage on to this day as to whether or not Satine was a good ruler, whether or not the takeover of her planet by Death Watch was in part due to her own negligence, or was it Maul's interference, or was it always going to happen? There's so many questions, and it's such a loaded topic. It wouldn't have worked for this scene.
I wonder if they're saving it, because
I do wonder if it's going to be in season 4, because we are getting a season 4. I do wonder if they will mention Satine later on, now that we have firmly established Mandalore, that, oh, my sister also used to rule, or this is the throne my sister ruled from.
Well, and also that, the armor comes from the Death Watch section, and then Bo is like the opposite of that. So it's interesting that their work, well, not to spoil anything moving forward, but that where the story goes in the end, it's interesting, the dynamics there. And I wonder if they'll bring up the complicated history that the two pair have with each other later on.
Right. I also think it's interesting to look at like Bo-Katan's journey versus Satine's journey, because Satine was very much, she had some good policies like, hey, all of this constant civil war is destroying our people. We need to stop fighting each other. But Satine was also very disrespectful of any traditionalist viewpoint that didn't align with her. So she was very much like, we need to move on, we need to move on, we need to move on. And part of that was good. Exiling Death Watch was a good thing because they wanted to continue fighting. But I also feel like she threw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. And she was like, no, everybody's got to be pacifist. This is how we're doing things from here on out. I'm not brokering any sort of disagreement with that. Whereas Bo-Katan, having walked both paths, is more in a position to understand how important those traditional beliefs can be to a group like the Children of the Watt, while also understanding the difference between that and something like Death Watch, which is just a conservative political faction. It's complicated, and it would really need its own episode entirely to talk about the politics of the Mandalorian rulers.
I also think it would be interesting if they decided to just maybe bring up that whole stuff maybe in Kenobi season 2, if we do a few flashbacks with Nicole Kidman and just say,
they did say they're not doing a Kenobi season 2. They did say that's
joking,
over.
But I am joking. But also
do a Nicole Mandalorian Civil War show. Also, yes, Nicole Kidman should play Duchess Satine Kryze.
Yeah, so just throwing that out there for Disney and Marvel, and or not Marvel, fucking Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I don't want Marvel anywhere near Star Wars right now.
Yeah, no, thank you. But anyway, we gotta move on.
We have got desperately to move on. Yeah, we will, I'm sure, talk about Duchess Satine Kryze and all of the positive things she did and all of the mistakes that were made at some point in the future. I'm sure this will come up throughout this season, because Bo-Katan does stand as a interesting contrast to her sister, but we do desperately need to move on. They get into the Mines of Mandalore, and lol, it's a tourist trap. It reminds me, so when this episode came out, I was talking in the Divas Discord, and I was like, yeah, this whole scene reminded me of that time I drank from the Fountain of Youth, in terms of it being this whole sort of tourist trap that you go into and stuff happens. And then I tried to move on from this statement, and several people were like, whoa, we need to wind this back. You drank from the Fountain of Youth? I was like, yeah, when I was like 6. It tastes like sulfur.
Well, it didn't work.
Terrible.
Zing.
Oh, fuck you, Bradley. Fuck you, Bradley. We can't all perpetually look 23, motherfucker.
We can if we actually drink from the Fountain of Youth and it accepts us. So actually, no, I learned in Pirates of the Caribbean 4, you have to drink from the Fountain of Youth from the Holy Grail. I think that's how it works. Like, so otherwise it doesn't work. It's just it's just water.
No, we went to, I think it's Ponce de Leon in Florida, or somewhere it's relatively close to there. This was back when you could go to Florida. This was back before Florida was a blighted hellscape. This was pre-2000. when Florida was actually pretty cool before it. I know it's difficult for people to know now, but there did used to be a time where Florida was actually a pretty okay place to go. But yeah, we went to the Fountain of Youth, and it was basically the same thing. It was like this pool, this sort of fountain that they had little like plastic cups and or little like what is it, the paper cups, and you could drink a little bit from the Fountain of Youth. Tasted terrible. That's all I remember about it. But this Mines of Mandalore scene reminds me of that.
For sure. I think Din got a little over his head when he decided to show up.
Well, then he got like under his head because he falls in, which a lot of people were surprisingly mad about.
Right. And
they're like, he falls way too fast. It doesn't make sense that he wouldn't see the thing. And I'm like, it's moving the plot along. Just, you got to roll with it.
But also, he can barely see. Like, he's in this helmet and he can't see anything. And also, all the stuff's underwater. And of course, there's going to be this drop off you don't see necessarily. And he just slips and falls. Like,
and he's wearing like full Beskar plating. So, like, obviously, he's going to sink like a rock.
Instantly. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to go down like immediately. Holy shit, a mythosaur is my next note.
Right. Also, why is it underwater? Does it need to breathe? Does it sleep underwater?
It apparently sleeps underwater. We'll see later on.
It's an aquatic animal now? Like, I'm confused. Like, I guess I don't really know the history of the mythosaur, so I don't really know anything about it.
It seems like it is an amphibious animal, which can breathe both air and water.
Okay.
It seems like it was hanging out deep beneath Mandalore for hundreds of years.
I like
it. And the bombings fucked up the topography so much that it is now free and able to wander about, which it mostly has simply decided to stay in bed and continue taking a nap. Which, if I was the mythosaur, same. Like, same.
It's very reminiscent of, dragon mythology that they slumber for years or something underground or in caves. And it's like, oh, well, no, something just disturbed me. So now I'm awake.
Yep. Yeah, the mythosaur is very like a mythological dragon and it harkens back to ancient traditions of a monster like that sleeps beneath a body, usually bodies of water, but like monsters that sleep below bodies of waters are deep within caves and you're not supposed to go in there because you'll wake the monster up, etc., etc. Yeah, it's really interesting that Bo-Katan sees it and not Din. This will have implications because this is a moment where Bo-Katan gets put on the path to where she's going. Is at the early part of this episode, Din realized that a story he had been told about Mandalore was wrong. And it sets him on his path through the season. Bo-Katan realizes a story that she thought was wrong is actually true, which is an interesting dichotomy for the two characters. And then,
this sets her on her journey of faith, essentially, or like faith restoration, because she's like, oh shit, that mythological creature exists. Like seeing a unicorn, being like, oh, I guess magic does exist, or
magic could exist. Right. Den has found out there's one thing about his beliefs that are provably wrong. Bo has found out there's one thing she thinks is wrong that's provably true. So it's like, neither of them is exactly correct. The Children of the Watch and their dogmatic adherence to their beliefs and their certainty is wrong, but so is Bo-Katan's complete rejection of it. Which is very interesting. And then again, she doesn't take her helmet off at the end of the episode.
Right, which may or may not have implications.
We end on a shot of her with her helmet on. Interesting. Like, and that's where the episode ends. Give us a directed by and written by.
Directed by Rachel Morrison and written by, of course, Jon Favreau. Now, Rachel Morrison, I looked up because I didn't recognize that name. I believe this is the first episode she's written of The Mandalorian, and
directed. She's the director of The Mandalorian.
Sorry, directed. This is the first episode she's directed. So far, she's one of our newer directors, and she previously has directed shows like The Morning Show, American Crime Story, or Quantico. So that's pretty much
you are skipping over the vast majority of her incredibly impressive resume because Rachel Morrison is not generally a director.
Yes, I was focusing on her directing debuts, but you're right. She is a cinematographer, and she has a lot of interesting things such as Black Panther and other things that people may know.
She's the cinematographer of Fruitvale Station.
Gotcha.
I'm seeing if there's anything else on here that I recognize. But yes, she's a cinematographer for Black Panther. That's the big important one, which is Kick-Ass. So she only just recently started
directing.
Back in 2015. She started directing TV episodes. So it looks like she's primarily a cinematographer. And then obviously written by Jon Favreau, because fucking everything in the season was written by Jon Favreau, with the exception of episode 3 and episode 5, I believe.
I also do find it interesting that she directed this episode. She's mostly a cinematographer. I do find that interesting because most of this episode takes place in a dark mine. So I find that very interesting because that's something hard to light necessarily. You know, sometimes when you're watching these shows, sometimes it can be considered dark. I never had that problem in this episode. So I find that interesting that they chose a cinematographer, or someone who mostly does cinematography, to work on an episode that is primarily darkened lighting.
Yes. I think that it's probably why this episode is the way it is.
Yeah.
Is because they had somebody who understands cinematography, because it would have been very, very easy to fuck up all the dark stuff under Mandalore. And so having somebody in the director's chair who knows how the cinematography is going to work. The cinematographer of this episode is a gentleman named David Klein. David Klein is a cinematographer on a lot of stuff. He's the cinematographer on 5 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. So he's missing episode 2 and episode 4. He's not the cinematographer, but he is a cinematographer on the rest of it. He's a cinematographer on 57 episodes of Homeland, Deadwood the movie, Red State the movie, True Blood, Cop Out. He's a cinematographer on. He's a cinematographer on Clerks 2. So he's been doing cinematography all the way back. His first cinematographer role was actually the original Clerks in 1994. So we've got a veteran cinematographer on this, and we've got somebody in the director's chair who's primarily a cinematographer, which is probably why this episode looks as good as it looks.
Right.
Awesome. Final thoughts on this episode, Bradley?
Final thoughts, Pelimoto should show up in every Star Wars thing ever. So far, it's true so far in the TV shows, minus Kenobi, but I consider that its own thing. So at least in the Mandoverse, she has shown up at every single Mandoverse project. I'm hoping that she shows up in Ahsoka, even briefly, just so that we can keep the connectivity of her showing up in the Mandoverse era. However, that was pretty much my thing. I do think that some of the scenes would have served better in the opening of the previous episode, or like connected them a little bit better, or done just a 2 premiere episode. But other than that, this was a pretty good episode. It was very action heavy, so there's nothing really wrong with that per se, but it did give us, when it wasn't action heavy, it was very good because it did give us a little history of Mandalore. So I did like that.
Every time that I've watched, because this is now my 3rd time watching this episode, every time I have watched it, I have liked it more. I didn't really like it when I first watched it. Then I watched it again with my boyfriend, and I thought it was better having watched it a second time. And now the 3rd time watching it, knowing where the season is going, I'm like, oh, this is a really good step in that. Especially the conversation between Bo-Katan and Din. I keep calling him Din, and that's not necessarily accurate. I'm going to keep calling him Din because I've been calling him Din since 2020. I'm not about to stop. If you're just joining us, you'll find out what I mean by that in a later episode of the season. But yeah, those are my final thoughts on it. Really, really good episode in the broader context of the rest of the season. Alrighty, well, we will be back next week with The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, The Convert, the title of which does not refer to what you would think. In the meantime, pluggables, you can find me on For Light and Dice, High Republic TTRPG set, as I said, during the High Republic, which I do with Chris from Darkside Divas, Hope from J Guys and Jedi, Jess from Roof Helps Pod Race, and our friends Colton and Nathan. That is an excellent podcast that you should listen to. You can also check out Queen's Court on Peacock. Bradley was the travel coordinator. So if you want to know why does Bradley sound like that in all of the Andor episodes, that would be why he sounds like that. So if you like trashy reality television, watch that show. I'm going to keep promoting it because God knows somebody has to. That's what
I'll
I said.
probably have something different to promote, later on. But for now, that's the only thing.
For now, we're promoting Queen's Court.
Right. So, when summer rolls around, I'll have something else to promote. So that'll be the better thing to watch.
Oh, interesting.
It's still just as bad, but it's slightly
just
better.
As trash. Reminder, Bradley's day job is that he works on production of trashy reality television.
Of course. So if you love that stuff, I'm giving you what you want.
He is giving the people what they want. And what I want is for you to run the socials.
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gays. Did Charles fuck something up? Send us a message at goldsquadrongays@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Goldsquadgays. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Goldsquadrongays. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gays, where we post the podcast as well as exclusive content. Please join us next week and every week for more of Gold Squadron Gays.
Because then Bradley just agrees with me, and that makes me feel tingly in my back. Could be the I'm in my 30s. That actually probably is what the tingling in my back is.